We're going to go ahead and get started as folks are quickly making their way. I'm going to keep my remarks very, very short because I want you to hear from Mary Levi, and then she will be introducing our incredible speaker today. I don't have to tell you of all of the observances that we have on our ethnic and racial justice, on GLBT, on women's issues, on all of the groups of people who have been through the course of this country legally discriminated against. It is kind of how we pulled out these social justice issues. There's a lot of issues that we could have pulled out. These are groups of human beings who were seen as less than human beings because of the color of their skin, because of their immigrant status, because of the language they spoke. And how ironic that in this time of hate speech against immigrants, that the folks that often issue that hate speech, unless you are a Native American, you came from immigrant stock. Your great, 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 great somebody came over on a boat from somewhere, and I never hear them calling for 325 million Americans to go back where they came from. And maybe the only people who have the right to say, everybody needs to, get out of my land, are our American Indian, Alaska Native communities, which of course they don't. These are very welcoming communities. These are people who live in harmony with nature, who revere the very earth we live on. And when you look, as we often do, as to where our most marginalized communities are, where our highest poverty communities are, where our communities who face the biggest challenges of discrimination, you can look on reservations all over this country, sovereign nations all over this country, whose students we serve, and you will find the legacy of discrimination by looking at our American Indian, Alaska Native communities. I am very, very pleased to invite to come up to begin this observation the chair of our American Indian, Alaska Native Caucus, who will lead us in a reverence, in a ceremony that will hopefully get us in the right mindset to hear today's observance speaker. Mary Levi, please welcome Mary.
Asqualita Lily. Siwa, Still Clan from the Hopi lands of Arizona. Dawayansi to my father and my mother, and Gya to my nieces and nephews. Mother to Bobby and Alora, and So to Briar, and another one who's going to be born any day. Wife and friend to Robert, and to all of you. For I am Mary Levi, chair of the American Indian Alaska Native, who walks side by side to continue and navigate the task that we have at hand. So today, we, the American Indian Alaska Native Caucus, offer this great spirit prayer to all of us who have had a hard journey this last few months and weeks and days. So please stand with me and be at peace for a little bit. And as we do, we always offer our sage, as well as we always offer a little bit of peace for you, so we have Skittles on your table. So, O great spirit, whose voice I hear in the wind, whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me, and I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and beautiful purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so I may understand the things you have taught my people. Help me to remain calm and strong and face all that comes towards me. Let me learn the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. Let me seek pure thoughts and act with the intentions of helping others. I seek strength not to be greater than my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me always be ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes. So when the light fades, as the fading sunset, my spirit comes to you without shame. Thank you to our Sue for offering that prayer to us. So we take this in for all of you as we think and offer our ideas as we come forward. So thank you. So this morning I am so thrilled to present our speaker, Denise Juneau, to you. Denise Juneau has deep roots in Montana. Her family was in the state long before it was even a state. By second grade, her family moved to Browning, where Denise's grandmother was a school cook. Her grandfather was a decorated veteran who drove a school bus, and both her parents were educators. Denise's first job was alongside her grandmother in the school kitchen, and where she first learned how education changes lives, including her own. After graduating from Browning High School, Denise received her BA from Montana State University, and before earning a master's from Harvard Graduate School of Education. After teaching in North Dakota and Montana and working at the state education agency, Denise attended law school in her spare time and became an attorney. In 2008, she became the first American Indian woman in the country to win the executive statewide office of Superintendent of Public Education. In 2012, she was reelected to a second term. And as a superintendent, Denise launched an unprecedented effort to make sure that all Montana students who graduated from high school were prepared for college or the military and civilian careers. She developed a statewide initiative, Graduation Matters Montana, which brings together schools, business leaders, community members, students, and families to work together to a common goal. From high school, for every graduate from high school to succeed. Since the start of Graduation Matters, graduation rate had increased to its highest level ever recorded, which had a positive impact on the students, the state's economy. Denise also sets sits on the Montana's Land Board, which has a constitutional duty to manage the state's natural resources in a way that has the largest financial benefit to public schools. Denise has advocated for responsible natural resource development in a way that benefits everyone. She's an enrolled member of Mandan Hidatsa tribes and a descendant of the Blackfeet tribe. Please join me in a very NEA welcome to Denise Juneau.
Thank you. Well, you haven't heard me speak yet, so better hold on to that. All right, I'm timed, so I'm going to take out my phone. It's great to be here and see all of you. Very friendly faces, a lot of friends in the crowd, and thank you for all of your support over this past decade of doing the work that we do and the work that matters to not just Montana, but to this country. Oki, Nixuquaks, Nitanaku, Denise Juneau. Amskapi Pakani, name is Blue Cloud Woman. I just greeted you in the Blackfeet language. I said, hello, my friends and relatives. My name is Denise Juneau. My Blackfeet name is Blue Cloud Woman. So now that I've established that we're family, I'm allowed to hit you up for cash, just so you know. It's true. Thank you so much for having me at this board meeting and for undertaking this really important work. And thank you, learning from diverse voices to help dismantle institutional racism. Undoing the underlying inequities in our education system takes all of us and our persistent attention. We will never have justice for all until we make sure that every child gets a fair shot at becoming educated, that families have safety nets that help them get on their feet, that communities of deep poverty get the tools necessary to achieve the American dream, and that our national leaders learn to empower their people instead of tearing them down. I asked Lily what she thought I should talk about today, and she told me, just be yourself. You have such a warm personality. And I thought, what a great compliment. Then I looked up the word warm in the dictionary, and it said not so hot. So I'm not sure if that was a compliment or not. And I also know I'm standing between all of you in lunch and other meetings and all of that, and it's really hard to be in that position as a speaker. And so we'll try to be a little interactive, but I know when I was sitting in conferences during keynotes and all of that, there's another little prayer that sometimes we say that says, Dear Lord, please if I must die, please let it be during a keynote speech. That way, the transition between life and death won't be quite so dramatic. But it's important for you to be having these conversations at this national level. It's important for everyone involved in public education to help our young people understand and respect individual differences in gender, race, culture, religion, class, politics, ability, sexual orientation, and physical appearance. We must help them understand that each of us has a life story that gives us a different lens from which to view the world, and that each of our stories is important. My life story takes me from Head Start to Harvard, from a small reservation town in Montana to a national education leader. I'm an enrolled member of the Mandan Hidatsa tribes located in North Dakota. Those are my mother's tribes. However, I grew up in Browning, Montana, which is located on the Blackfeet Reservation, my dad's tribe. I graduated from Browning High School. I have a bachelor's from Montana State, a master's from Harvard, Graduate School of Education, law degree from the University of Montana. I've been a teacher, an attorney. I served 2 terms as Montana State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and as you heard, I was the first American Indian woman to serve in a statewide elected executive position anywhere in the country. And our state did that, and I think that's not an insignificant matter. And I bring forward this issue because it's important to understand its context and how meaningful that is. The story of American Indian involvement in the public education and the American political system is actually very brief. My great-great-grandparents observed the beginning of reservation life in the middle to late 1800s and early 1900s where they saw a destruction of their known way of life and had no opportunity to attend any education system except a religious mission school here and there. They were on reservations before Montana became a territory and became a state. My great-grandparents attended school at a time when Indians were educated at off-reservation federal boarding schools hundreds of miles away from home, or at the Bureau of Indian Affairs day schools, or at religious mission schools. They could not attend public schools. My great-grandfather attended school at Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, had to catch the train way out there and far away from home. And it was not until 1935 in our state, when some Blackfeet parents sued the state, that Indians were even allowed to attend public schools. My grandparents were the first generation to attend public schools in the state of Montana. My parents are second generation public school students, and still, their first years after high school were spent at Haskell Institute in Kansas in the 1960s, during the civil rights era in America, at a time when many Americans were fighting for equality. My parents, as adults, were in a school where they went to town only on the weekends and had lights out at 9 p.m. After graduating from Haskell, my parents went to California on a federal program called relocation. They took Indians to the cities and gave them a job in order to assimilate them into mainstream society. I like to say that I'm the product of a federal policy. Many of my peers in my generation were born in cities. Oakland, LA, Cleveland, all across this country. My grandparents were born before Indians had the right to vote or were even considered citizens of the United States. That happened in 1924. Let that stick in your mind because it becomes important later. And then Indians could only vote if they were a taxable property owner. It wasn't until 1954 when Indian people could vote whether they were taxable property owners or not. Think about that, about really how brief that history is, how voting rights matter, how public education matters, how federal policies matter. And speaking of federal policies, we are definitely living in interesting times. We're living with a mixture of hope and fear, of emotional ups and downs, a time of upheaval and division. However, it's not the first time in our history when our country's been divided. We did live through a civil war. More recently, we've had the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and it's also not the first time people have reacted and became activated out of fear. Think of the Committee on Un-American Activities, the internment of Japanese Americans, and the forcible moving of American Indians to reservations. In spite of our current context of uncertainty, there's plenty of room for hope. I saw hope and optimism every day as I worked as state superintendent and during the campaigns that I had. There are so many people working to make the world a better place for all people, all of you in this room. I remain optimistic about our future because of the work that all of you do every day. And as we look at our current affairs, it's important to make sure we keep an eye on our history and the work that's been done to make our world a better place. We need to remember our victories, large and small, because we have made great strides. And while we need to celebrate our historical successes, it's important not to be nostalgic about our past. For many segments of our population, there were no good old days. What did exist was the promise that things could be better. In order to have hope in a better future, you have to have faith in the ability of people and institutions to carry out that promise. I know that public institutions can still promote the public good, that elected officials really can govern in a way that brings people together towards solving big challenges. Elected officials and government can work in a way that further common causes. The primary lesson I learned from my work as state superintendent is that positive change can happen in communities large and small, deep in poverty, more affluent, when we bring diverse people together to work together to create better outcomes for the most vulnerable in our communities. When we do that, it works. That's why elections matter, because good policy means electing good people. And I must brag on my state a little bit, Montana. And the type of education system that's being developed there that embraces an accurate history and respects the contemporary lives of American Indian people and its tribes. I mean, we talk a lot about cultural competency, cultural curriculum. It's actually happening in our state. And we're lucky because our state constitution actually reads, "The state recognizes the distinct and unique cultural heritage of the American Indian and is committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural integrity." We call it Indian Education for All. Our constitutional delegates in 1972 understood that it's important to know and understand the basis of our country, that there are still over 500 sovereign nations within our nation's borders, that each of these, quote, domestic dependent nations have their own histories, governments, issues, languages, and cultures, and that there is a political and a legal basis for legitimizing their existence that is written into the founding documents of this country. Without knowing this basic information, this political and legal foundation of American Indian tribes and people, you really cannot truly understand our nation's underpinnings, our collective history as Americans, and even our current political affairs. And without understanding that accurate American history, it's hard to dismantle institutional racism because it forms the basis of that concept. In Montana, all students receive an education that includes American Indian history, culture, and contemporary issues. They have lessons about treaties, Indian plant uses, traditional games, tribal governments, and so much more. But implementing Indian Education for All did not happen overnight, and we certainly are not done. It took a lot of work from many people for many years. It took political action, community and statewide advocacy, legislative action, and legal action. And those efforts will continue. Our motto at the beginning of the implementation effort was to move beyond blame, shame, and guilt. We had to get over pointing fingers to the past and blaming each other for where we are, because we needed to move beyond that if it was really going to truly happen in our schools. There's so much horrific history that is difficult to move beyond. The origins of our country are not based in rainbows and unicorns. Presenting an accurate history in schools takes really hard work. It means we have to present facts as facts and help people understand and work through our country's racist underpinnings. At the beginning, when we really started implementing Indian Education for All, we asked teachers all of a sudden to teach about Indians, although they went through their education system without learning anything about Indians, or they learned inaccuracies while they were in school. Montana's teaching force is 98% white. We had to make sure they became empowered to learn about Indians so that they could implement it in their classrooms. We talked facts. Many actually became upset because they had not been taught an accurate history or never had discussions about the contemporary context of American Indians and tribes. They were mad at their education system for not providing that. They wanted to make sure that didn't happen with the group of students they were teaching. We've had the opportunity to hear some amazing success stories about how Indian Education for All has transformed classroom teaching and learning. And we now have non-Indian teachers keynoting Indian Education for All conferences, talking to other teachers about the importance of teaching about American Indian people and tribes. Montana includes American Indians in its standards, curriculum, professional development. Tribal voices are being included in classrooms all across our state. Each tribe now has its own tribal history project, their story as told by them. An accurate and authentic history of America and our state is being presented to all students. I like to think about the future of the kindergarten students after they are educated in a system where Indian Education for All is robust across their school. Those future state, tribal, and national leaders are going to make better decisions and have better opportunity to work toward justice for all, because they will not be scared of the other. They will know that differences exist, be able to talk about those differences, and at the end of the day, look across the table and understand each other as human beings, lending to the fabric of our communities. The next generation will lead the way, but they need us to help them. They need to be provided opportunities to do so. And why are these things like what you're doing today, these observances, so important? because it's important to talk about how to integrate culture into your communities, into your schools, into your classrooms, and what that looks like. You have to know you have to have some basis of knowledge to move forward. And you have to allow yourself to make mistakes, allow yourself to be wrong, allow yourself not to be the expert, and to learn from others. And sometimes as professionals, that's really, really hard. So we are going to be a little interactive right now and actually play a game. Hold on. Hold on. So this is sort of, we call it Indian 101. Oh, it's not working. Oh, hold on. Can you hear that? All right. So I will need, I guess, 3 volunteers.
Already.
All right. All right, jump up to the mics. All right. That's 4 is fine.
We're all from the
It
same
doesn't matter.
class. You know that?
So I will also need help from up here at seeing who raises their hand first. How about that? All right. So let's start over there. You get to choose from the board. So our categories are legal lingo, the essentials, American history, are you smarter than a Montana 5th grader? And the categories, I'll tell you what they mean. Legal lingo are just sort of, Indians have a legal and political relationship with the federal government. And that's really, we'll get into those kinds of conversations. The essentials are just sort of essential understandings people should have about American Indians. American history, of course, is a historical context. Are you smarter than a Montana 5th grader? These questions come from actually our Montana standards in the 5th grade. And so, and then the last category is fact or myth. There are a lot of stereotypes and myths and misconceptions that go around all the time about American Indians. And so that will be phrased in the question of, is it a fact or is it a myth? And as you say, what is a myth or what is a fact? So it'll be played like Jeopardy. We'll see how far we get. What's my time on this? Where?
Dory, how much time do we have?
All right. All right. Let's start over there.
Okay, fact or myth for 500.
Ooh.
Whoa.
All right. Fact or myth for 500. American Indians do not pay taxes.
Myth.
What is in the form
The
of a
fact
question,
is they
please?
do pay taxes.
No. In the form of a, no, it is in the form of a question, please.
What is a myth?
That is correct. So if you could go to the next slide. No, go back to 500. And then go to the next slide. So, Indians do pay taxes. I wish I didn't have to pay taxes, but I do. Pay federal income taxes, other taxes. There is American Indians who live on reservations do not pay state income tax because they are on trust land, federal trust land. And the state does not have the ability to tax or govern American Indians living on their own reservation. So, all right, we'll go back to home. We'll go back there.
Okay. I will take smarter than a 5th grader for 500.
Oh, everybody's going to the big money.
Whoa.
The first American Indian who was from the Sac and Fox tribe to win a gold medal in the pentathlon and decathlon in 1912. He also played professional baseball and professional football.
Who is Armstrong?
Beep.
Oh.
Nope. All right, go ahead.
Who is Jim Thorpe?
That is correct. Jim Thorpe was a phenomenal athlete way back in the day, and he went to Carlisle Indian School, been called actually the greatest athlete of the 20th century, and so you should look him up. He's really good for middle school students to learn about and to really put Indians into sort of that type of context because it's about sports, and it's kind of cool. So, yeah, and they took his medals away. They've restored him to his family. It's a long story, and it's a really good story, so you should read about him. All right.
American history for 500.
Ooh, big money again. Where does this language come from? He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
Who is? Who?
All right.
I don't.
Who wants to take over?
Who is who? Who is the Declaration of Independence?
Yeah, what is?
What is it?
So a lot of times in school, when you're using primary documents, it's important to read beyond the first few lines. And a lot of times we learn...
I have.
Oh.
It was from
Yeah.
a friend. I have a. Our school is. I live in Lawrence, Kansas, so Haskell Indian
yeah.
University is right behind my school, and we are now working on changing the name of our school. And Jim Thorpe and Billy Mills are the two names that have come up. So
That's
I thought that
awesome.
was really cool. So that's what one of our
All
schools is
right.
going to be called.
Yeah, and so the Declaration of Independence, I mean, these are the founding documents of our country, and it really was a declaration of war. And so it was sort of like, here are all the problems that is happening from the crown. And so I think we know when you're teaching American history, dive deeper into those documents. They're primary history documents. They're a way to bring to life an accurate history of what was going on and to bring more resources to bear as you're teaching that type of content. All right.
I'll take the essentials, 500, please.
The leading football team at the center of a controversial issue of using American Indians as mascots.
Wow, that's a tough one. Who are the Washington?
Right. R word, the R word. And so, does that have sound on it? Like, can you play sound when you play that? All right, so just click the logo. And this is Sherman Alexie, another great Native author that all of you should be familiar with. Oh, it didn't go.
Yeah, open.
Open it.
How do you feel about naming of things? For instance, the Redskins, that's a discussion I always see on TV and people on Twitter fighting about it. And the honest truth is, I've never actually seen Native Americans be part of the discussion.
Well, we're never a part of the discussion about our lives ever. We're colonized. But the thing is, I know that Redskins is a racial slur because it's never been said in a positive way to me.
I've never thought of it like that.
I've never heard, like, hey, way to, do well on your SAT, Redskin.
That's a great way to look at it. Like, has it ever been said to you in a positive light?
No, and also for all these fans of the Redskins and the sports teams, I would challenge them to go into a tribal setting, go to a tribal council meeting and walk in and yell out to the assembled natives, "Hello, Redskins!" and see.
That's so funny because it's the exact same thing. If you go into a black neighborhood, it's the same thing. What's up, my Redskins? You can't say it. It's the same rule, basically.
It's the same rule.
If you cannot say it to the people's face and walk away with the same smile you had coming in. I know I come from a different world, but it seems to me, it could be anecdotal, it seems to me, it feels to me sometimes, that Native Americans are almost just not part of the conversations or the discussions, it's just like like, it's weird to get to a country like, where's the people of the place?
Well, and the strangest thing is that we're everywhere in pop culture. I mean, if don't turn the channel, but if you turn the channel right now, there's probably 17 channels with some Native American imagery going on.
The headgear,
The headgear,
yes,
the Western, a commercial. There's always something going on featuring this ancient idea of us, but nobody ever thinks of us in a contemporary sense. And we disappear.
Yeah. So, and what's important about that is like everybody can form an opinion about the mascot issue. And it's a really good way to engage students in having these conversations about contemporary American Indians. There are books out there, and there are good videos, and there are good ways to really provide provocative questions to young people and what that means and how does that play out. And so that's another important place that you can really enter into the conversation, because everybody can form an opinion on it, or they can fake an opinion on it, have debates, and those kinds of things. And so it's a good way to get into some of those issues. Back over here.
Okay, well, what the heck? Legal lingo for 500.
Oh, that was the answer.
It's awesome. What is the Commerce Clause?
No, that's my problem. I must have set it up wrong. So the clause of the U.S. Constitution that establishes the basis of a tribal-federal relationship is the Commerce Clause, because it actually mentions American Indians right in the Commerce Clause. And so just as you go back to founding documents, again, important to know. And I guess I'll just throw in here too, when you think about American Indians, it's not just a racial classification. We are a different sort of minority where we also have a legal and political relationship. And it is a legal and political classification. In order to be an American Indian, you have to be a member of an Indian tribe. And an Indian tribe develops its own membership criteria. And so if they define it by blood quantum, you have to meet the blood quantum. If they define it by community involvement, you have to be an engaged member of the community. And tribes are able to decide for themselves what their membership criteria looks like. But in order to be legally and politically an American Indian, you have to be you have to be a member of a tribe. And oftentimes that tribe has to be federally recognized. And I know American Indian people out there who may be close to full-blooded Indian of many different tribes. Think back to the relocation policy I talked about, where I am a member of, I am all kinds of different tribal blood in me because of being born out in the cities and where Indians met up from different tribes. So I know American Indian people who may be almost full-blood Indian blood, but not enough of any tribe to be actually affiliated and defined politically and legally as an American Indians. And those are sort of the struggles and issues that tribes deal with on a daily basis in American Indian people. All right, back there again.
I'll take American history for 300.
American Indians are the minority group with the most seniority, but it is this aspect that makes them unique from all other cultural and ethnic groups in the U.S.
What is they're the only cultural ethnic group that was actually born in the United States?
Oh, that's a good one. But it's this issue of sovereignty and the issue that the American Indians have. They have inherent sovereignty. They were here. They predate the U.S. Constitution. They were on this land, so it does go back to that before people came and colonized and conquered and all that kind of stuff. But it is that idea that they have inherent sovereignty to govern themselves, to develop their own membership, to do those types of things. And so it is that issue of sovereignty and who belongs to American Indian tribes that make them different from different kinds of minorities in this country. I'll go back to home.
Essentials for 400.
The hashtag associated with recent protest on the Standing Rock Reservation, North Dakota, to protect water and stop an oil pipeline. And you guys did a resolution on this last time. I heard it yelled out.
What is hashtag no
Yeah,
DAPL?
DAPL. And let's just play a small clip
heavily
of this. So
medicated.
this very short video, this is a song that through the MTV Music Awards, they have a new category called Standing Up to the Man or something like that, that actually won one of the music awards. Another good way to really engage young people.
That black snake was sent for us to grow, to shed the skin our ancestors pray, of wounds old and calloused, so that we may stay, so that we may unite, unity our tool. No weapons are found in this court of rule. Men becoming ki'ai, steadfast in their guard, protecting women's hearts as their song become roots. Roots to cast out healing for all sentient beings, to honor sacred mother, heart forward we heal. The salmon will run, the mauna will breathe, the rivers will flow. The rainbow is here and prophecy tells us all generations will hear.
Okay, that's good. You can shut it off. So it's just pointing out that there are these contemporary things out there that would really relate to young people. And in order to listen to that song and understand it, you have to know Sitting Bull, you need to know Leonard Peltier, you need to know that American Indians are still alive and visible in today's society, and that they're doing things, and that they're protesting. And you know, you can have debates in class about both sides of those issues as well, but it's a way, I think, that there are resources out there that you can use in your school and community to talk about these issues that are contemporary, but go back eons and eons of importance. All right, who's next?
Fact or myth for 400, please.
American Indians get money just for being American Indian. What is?
I know some, well, just for being American Indian?
Yep.
What is, I'm gonna say no.
All right. What is a myth?
What is a myth? Yeah.
Yep, what is a myth? So I wish I received a check every month just for being American Indian, but I do not. And sometimes American Indians receive funds that are distributed as a result of resource development or something that's going on in their tribe. And so they may get lease income on their property. And I'll just say this really quickly, is when this country was formed and treaties were made and all these things were happening, Indians were moved to reservations. And it's important to know that reservations, that term, think of what that is. It's a reservation of land for their own use. So it wasn't that they were given the land, it's that they reserved the land for themselves for their use through treaties in exchange for health, education, and all those things that come with treaty rights. And so as a result, again, of that relationship, a political and legal relationship through treaties, that's sometimes where these lease payments come from. And when those lands, and there was an allotment period where Indians received a certain number of acreage to turn them into farmers again, to civilize them, even though they weren't farmers in the past, a lot of tribes. They weren't deemed competent to manage their own land. And that still exists today. If I have land that is being leased agriculturally on the reservation, it's held in trust by the US government. A person can enter into an agreement, they then send the money to the federal government, and maybe the federal government sends it back to me. And so that concept is still exists today. And so that's sort of, you know, sometimes these things happen because they are in areas of really high poverty. You know, they fall under SNAP and distribution of those types of things. And so there is this myth out there that American Indians receive checks just for being Indian, and that is not true. So we'll go back home, go back over there. We'll do one more round, and then wrap it up.
Smarter than a fifth grader for 400. Maybe, maybe not.
The type of women's powwow dance known for its unique sound.
Ooh.
What is what?
I forgot what they're called.
What is Jingle?
Yep, that's it.
Jingle.
And this is just a book that's sometimes used in fifth grades across our state that is checked for bias and checked for all those things already. So it's a titled Jingle Dancer, and it's a contemporary book about a young American Indian girl who goes out and jingle dances in these different powwows. So just another resource for all of you. Back home. Go ahead.
I need to see the screen.
Oh.
Okay. All right. How about legal lingo for 300?
19th century federal policy of relocating or exiling Eastern tribes from their homelands to west of the Mississippi.
What is the Indian Relocation Act?
The Indian Removal Act.
Trail of
Okay.
Tears.
Just another good way. It's about American history of
Trail of
bringing
Tears.
in those ideas. All right, go back to you. Oh, back home.
Fact or myth for 100.
Historically, all American Indians and Alaska Natives spoke a common language.
What is yes?
What is no?
No. That's what I meant.
Yeah. What is a myth?
That was the coding talking.
There were over 400 or more languages spoken. There are still over 250 in this country. For the smallest minority in this country, we have the greatest diversity in languages. And so, you know, I wish I would have had time or had taken the initiative to learn my native language. I did not, and I think a lot of people in my generation are in that same boat, and it's hard because there are a lot of native languages dying now. And when a language goes, a culture often follows. And so the revitalization efforts of native languages in both Montana and some of your states and across this country are really important to pay attention to and to think about, and to have conversations with your policymakers about these issues, because it's really important to make sure that we're doing all we can to integrate native languages into schools and to make sure that students of the next generation are picking it up and doing, you know, I wish I would have done my part, and I failed in that effort. So, back home.
My turn. American history, 400.
Policy of educating American Indians beginning in the 1870s, often using the motto, kill the Indian and save the man.
What is when they would take Native American children and put them in boarding schools?
Yeah,
I
that's
forget
it.
what it's
Next.
called.
What are federal Indian boarding schools?
Yeah.
And I think like a study of federal Indian policy is so fascinating for people, because it really was, all these federal Indian policies about the basis of this country were about assimilating American Indians into this new idea of what America meant. And it often didn't jive with what the daily lives of American Indians and what was going on. And they were taken and they were stolen as very young children and taken to Pennsylvania and taken to South Dakota and taken to all these faraway places to take them away from their families and their culture and their way of being and learning and knowing. And that's really where a lot of the breakdown of native languages happened, is they weren't allowed to speak their native language. They often got their hair cut. They were beaten for practicing any of their culture and for speaking their language. And so a lot of the breakdown and the historical trauma that American Indians are still trying to overcome stem from federal Indian boarding schools. The distrust of education systems, the distrust of public schools in their communities. A lot of that can be traced back a couple generations to these federal Indian boarding schools. And education has a weird history in American Indian communities that was sort of, you know, they had a traditional way of learning. They learned from their elders. They learned from sitting around the fire. They learned through stories. They learned through oral tradition. And then America came, and actually the federal government at one time broke the country into churches and religions. And up in our area it was Catholic. Down in Navajo area it was Mormon. And they allowed churches to sort of educate and assimilate and Christianize American Indians. And that didn't work so well. In some areas it did. Then they gave it to the federal government, and these federal boarding schools happened. And it wasn't until later that states actually were able to say, okay, state public education. And now you see this movement back to tribal education, and tribes wanting to take it back and do their own education of their tribal children. And so it's just a big circle again, and just another way of looking at our public education system. Are we close to done? Yes, thank you. Okay. I'm told Julius won, so. And I'll actually, they have this PowerPoint, and we'll make it available to all of you. And there are other videos embedded in it, and you know, this is good to have conversation around because there's a lot of information in it. But this is sort of the way that we approach, you know, like I said, moving beyond blame, shame, and guilt. You can have conversations around very real issues that are really important. That are still very much alive and willing, and students are fascinated about it. And I learned that because teachers were fascinated about it. And if you present it in a way where you're not saying, your people came over and killed my people kind of thing, it actually works out really well. So I'm just going to do a close-up, and then we'll call it good. And so I will just say, through my work as a teacher, attorney, and an elected official, I've learned that each one of us has an important role to play in making our community and our world a better place. We draw strength and we draw resolve from the people who came before us, and we have a duty to the generations who come after us to continue to bend the arc of history toward justice. Our challenge and our opportunity is to stand together to protect the progress we've gained and to work for an even better tomorrow. Our work is vitally important in today's context. We must find a way through our bitter partisan politics and our ideological divides. The only way that we will thrive as a society is to work hard to create an equal playing field for everybody. I know we're currently in a place where our outlook can sometimes be discouraging, but I also know from all of my experiences that the people with the most optimism, hands down, every time, are young people. They are not afraid to dream big. They have faith that things can be better, and they have amazing resiliency. They show us time and again that minds and hearts can change if we learn to appreciate and understand our differences and be reminded that there is so much more that we have in common than sets us apart. I've also met parents whose greatest hope is that their children live happy and healthy lives. I talked with elders who still have the fire in their belly and the spark in their eyes to make positive change. They believe that we can and that we will do better. Their faith in the future continues my efforts. I believe our most important work is to do whatever we can to achieve equality and justice in our lifetime. That work is more important now than ever before. You know, my mom was a state legislator, and I learned a lot from her through her work and watching her on the floor rise and speak truth to power and often be the sole voice for justice, and to watch people rise up as a result of her voice And so, that's the thing of the stand up and rise up and make sure that you're providing voices for those who often can't speak. But every day, and I think some of the legislators, and particularly the Democrats in the state legislature, they say the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of every session. And at the end, the words are, "and justice for all." And they end with a quiet "someday." So let's take on that challenge so at some point we can say to ourselves, "and justice for all today." Collectively, we have the knowledge, the resources, and the ability to bring about the changes we want to see. And more importantly, I believe we have the courage and the conviction to see it through. So thank you for your work, and thank you so much for working on behalf of the next generation.
Denise Juneau.